sports, and faith. We've been enjoying the views and also the stories of amazing people in sports on this program. Today we'll bring you a global perspective from somebody who's lived his life in the UK and is in between a town. There's a town between Liverpool and Manchester. You get to know a lot more about him. He's an international consultant for management and development. Does a lot of trainings here in Ghana and elsewhere. And he's traveled and has a world view of the various faiths, societies around the world, what they believe in, and his own perspectives. I just can't wait to get into his story to understand what he believes is the relationship between sports and faith and what his take is also on as far as development is concerned. We'll do a quick break. When we come back, my guest is Michael Porter, ex-Bolton Wanderers player. Hi there, most welcome back. And so let me do the quick introduction of my guest. Very honorable man, has been on GTV Sports Plus, a lot of media platforms in the country and beyond, sharing his views on football and also beyond. He's a real gem in terms of developing, seeing the potentials in people, developing it and then making them better going forward. Michael, good day, most welcome to the program.
Thank you, Erasmus. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to our discussion today. Yeah.
I just can't wait to get into it.
Yeah.
Michael, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? I've tried to sum it up, but I think you are the best person.
Yeah. Where would you like me to start? My what I'm doing currently, or my early life as a? Where would you like me to start?
Well, the moment people start hearing ex-Bolton Wanderers,
okay,
I think it sends us back to the days of J.J. Okocha and the African players who played for Bolton Wanderers, and so it sort of gives you an idea who this man is.
Yeah, okay, so my early life then, I'll touch on the faith side of things and the sporting side of things, because both played a very important part in my early years, and so let me start off by saying that as a young boy, I was very lucky to be brought up with in a Christian in a Christian family. I'm a Roman Catholic. That's my faith.
Okay.
And like most kids, when you're 5, you go off to junior school, and I went to my local school, Our Lady's Roman Catholic school, where I stayed till I was 11. And of course, during those years, Mum and Dad, bless them, they were strong Catholics. They had close links to our local priest, Father Daly. Mum was always at church. Dad was involved as a sidesman at church. He'd go around with the collection boxes and he'd do other tasks, making sure people were seated in the right places. So church was part of my parents' life, and of course being brought up in a very much a working class family, because as children we didn't have an awful lot. My father was the youngest of 13 children. He was born in 1939, so
13 children.
1934, 5 years before the war. He was the youngest, and so they didn't have much. So as a young boy, Dad had to struggle. But my mum and Dad, they were hard-working people. My father worked for Unilever, and my mother was a hairdresser. And there was 3 of us, so I was the eldest boy, and I have 2 younger brothers. They're both doing well. So we all had this upbringing. We all lived in, all in the same house. 3 lads, challenges. You've got 3 boys growing up. Mum and Dad were always working. Church was a big part of their life, and of course at school we were indoctrinated in the Catholic methodology. It was all. We had to go to church on a Sunday. On Monday when we got to class, we'd be asked to recite the gospel. And if you didn't know what the gospel was, of course, you were in hot water in those days. So, of course, we had a very good Catholic upbringing. To a certain extent, it was, when you get a bit older, maybe you're thinking sometimes it was a little bit too much, but it was fine. So I became an altar boy at a young age, looking very angelic, with my white smock and helping to carry the cross.
I can imagine that.
Helping the priest with his communion and things like that, ringing the bells. I had little jobs like that. So, and I enjoyed that. Clearly, as 11, 12, 13-year-old, I took great enjoyment out of being part of the church, as you do. And I always remember the walking day processions we had once a year in May or June. They were wonderful times, all the kids together processing round the town. And then, of course, as I'm developing as a child, 11, I really, my football career started at 11, I suppose. I hadn't played apart from in the streets with my friends before that, but at Our Ladies, we never had a football team. Then all of a sudden, two parents appeared, and they decided they wanted to set up a football team and help one of the teachers. So we did that. And actually, we didn't know, but we had a lot of good players in our school.
To help one of the teachers?
Yeah. So most of our teachers at school were ladies. They were all, and although we played sports, it was not no competition. So we just played internally amongst ourselves. But one or two of the fathers of the kids at the school who were interested in football realised on watching a friendly that there was some potential there. So they came in to support the teacher to help to set up a football team for the kids, under 11. Yeah? And so that's what we did. And we did so well. We won most of the games that we played. And then I got picked up by Warrington, which was my team, as selected for the town.
Wow. So
So that was my first honour as a schoolboy, and I was, my father in particular was so proud. You know, he's playing for Warrington now. You know, not Our Ladies. You know. So anyway, this went on, and that was the start of my football career, playing for Warrington against other towns. You know, we played against Liverpool, Manchester. We played against Southport. We played in Wales. All these different, you know, and it was good. It was a reasonable level at 11 years old. But anyway, after that, I left the Catholic environment to a certain extent, and I went to my senior school, which was, I explained to you earlier, it was non-Catholic. So of course the sort of doctrination that we had was slightly different. But what we did have there was, it was a very good school for sport. I can tell you that the school I went to was called Beaumont School. It was the school that held the trials for the English rugby schools. Okay. So it was that big that, you know, any trials was conducted at our school, which gave me a great opportunity. So it was like the magnet for rugby. So of course I started to play rugby as well as football, and I found that I was pretty good at rugby. I used to play scrum half or standoff. I was very quick, and I could pass the ball quick and dart in and out, you know. And I soon came to notice to the selectors, and then at under 14, 15 level, I got selected for the county, wow, not the town. So I'm one up now. I'm playing for Lancashire. I won 3 caps with Lancashire. But alongside of this, my football was developing, and of course we were in a proper league system now, playing against other schools in, I think, 12 schools in the league, and so we played home and away, and then we had Cheshire Cups as well, so we had a good run in that. And I kept going with this, and then at 14 I was playing for my local team, because I went into the youth system then, playing for local teams, and I was doing well. And I got spotted one day by a guy called Wilf Rigby. He was a scout for Bolton Wanderers. He came to watch a game. He liked me. He went, talked to my dad, said, "Oh, your son's okay." He said, "Where do you live?" Took the details, and then one thing leads to another. Mm-hmm. And of course, because of my sporting endeavours, to a certain extent, my church going on a Sunday started to suffer, simply because the requirement on me to play sport both Saturday and Sunday. And this was challenging for me, and also my mum. My dad would sometimes stand up for me and say, "Oh, you know, he's yeah." But mum would always say, "Well, you can go to church in the evenings, you know, you don't have to go in the mornings," because we had this couple of years where there was I didn't want to upset my parents, so I tried my best to do, but sometimes I played 2 games on a Sunday, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, and by 5 o'clock I was exhausted. So to a certain extent the religion side fell away, not totally but partially, to make way for the sport. So one day I was working on a caravan site, mowing a lawn during the school term,
Okay.
and then all of a sudden the manager of the caravan shouted to me, "Mike, quick, come to the phone." He said, "You've got a telegram." I don't know whether you remember telegrams.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
I've seen it in the movies, but I didn't experience it. Let me tell you the gospel truth.
She said, your dad's on the phone, you've got a telegram from Bolton Wanderers. This was 10 o'clock in the morning. He said, "You've got to get home." He said, "The telegram, you're playing against Manchester City this afternoon at 3 o'clock. Go home, bring your boots and report to Burnden Park at 2 o'clock. So this was my first experience. I'd had a trial. The trial had gone well, and then they called me up to play on this Saturday. So of course, all hands to the pumps. My dad came to pick me up, took me home, picked up my boots and my kit, and I was off to Burnden Park playing the game, which I did okay. And then it started. I signed for Bolton Wanderers as a schoolboy, and that meant that once you signed for one team, you could not play for others. At the same time, I'd had interest from Everton. I'd played a few games for Everton, and also Coventry City. I'd had some interest from them, Crewe Alexander. But in the end, rightly or wrongly, I signed for Bolton Wanderers. I felt that was the team for me, and I liked the environment there. So that more or less changed my life. Once you sign for a team, there's a bit of pressure on you as well. And of course, I was still at school, and I went to my master one day because I was under pressure at Bolton to drop rugby, but I think I was better at rugby than I was at football, in all honesty. And when I went to my master and told him that I was dropping rugby, he was devastated, because he had plans for me, to sort of go on for the not only the county trials, but to go into the national trials. And but I couldn't play both. And the fact is, rugby is a very physical game, and if I'd have got an injury or a knock, then I would have had problems. So anyway, I told him, sorry, I'm stopping playing rugby. He was upset, and he never spoke to me. He never spoke to me for a while after that, until he got used to the idea. So of course, my early football career was then with Bolton Wanderers. That we were in Division 1, which was now the Premier League at the time. Ian Greaves was our manager in the team. I joined the team at 14, but in the first team we had Sam Allardyce. He was a centre half.
Sam Allardyce,
yeah, Sam
later on
Allardyce
became the manager.
Yeah.
And he's still around.
He's still around, managing West Brom now.
Yeah.
We had Peter Reid, who went on to manage. He played for England, and he went on to manage Everton and Manchester City, and a number of other great players. You might not know a lot of these names, but Roy Greaves and Peter Nicholson, Gary Jones, Neil Watmore, some wonderful players, all local players or regional players, but all British in those days.
Okay. Well, just to touch on something, I want to understand something from the perspectives from all that you related. Was this more a religious practice? Let's say in Catholicism, is this more a religious practice? Go to church Sunday, say the mass, do things in this particular way, or you had a one-on-one relationship with this concept of God? I mean, at that young age, what did you have?
Well, moving back to that then, of course, I went to church every Sunday. I had to go to confession once a week. You're familiar with confession, where you go to the box and the priest is there on the other side, and you tell him what you've done, and he gives you a penance, and you go away and you say your penance, and it wipes the slate clean, to a certain extent, and then you can take communion then. So of course, not only was I encouraged and educated to go to church, I also went to confession. Confession was on a Saturday, which cleaned your plate before church on a Sunday. That meant you could take God as the host and drink the wine. So I was a regular at confession, and I loved being part of the church. And my parents brought me up to be respectable, honest, trustworthy.
Yeah.
And a lot of this stuff comes from the Bible. Thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that. And of course, the Catholic upbringing that I had has been with me for my life. And you know, I can't thank my parents enough for the way they brought me up, and but part of that came from, I believe, the faith that they followed, because they were good. They are good people. Or they were good people. I lost my mum recently, and they followed.
You lost your mum recently.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and I'll come to that maybe a bit later if we've got time. But this faith helped me an awful lot, even with my sport, because my mum was a great believer in God, and she was always praying for me, praying that I'd do well. She had great faith in St Anthony, who's one of the patron saints. And St Anthony, if you had a wish, he would listen to you.
So St Anthony of Padua.
I think so. Yeah.
He's a patron for sports.
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. And my mum was always praying to St Anthony, and also I remember. Are you familiar with Lourdes, the shrine in France, the Catholic shrine? You know, where Our Lady supposedly appeared, and there's now a shrine there with water, and my mum was a great believer in Lourdes, Our Lady of Lourdes, and her sister, my aunt, they used to go regularly to Lourdes, and Lourdes was a place where people who were disabled or had terrible illnesses had great belief, and they would bathe in the waters of Lourdes,
and they could be healed.
Or they would take the Lourdes water, holy water that was blessed, and they drink the water, and miracles happened. Not every time, of course, but there was this miraculous phenomenon around Lourdes, and my mother was a great believer in healing and faith and praying, you know, and I've never forgotten her for that, you know, for that part of her life. And of course it instilled in me, you know, because I used to pray as well as go to church. I used to pray before I used to sleep, just to myself. I never used to tell anybody. And if I had something happening in my life that was let's say I had a big game coming up, the night before I'd pray. I wouldn't tell anybody, but I'd just pray to myself. And you know, and then sort of in my teenage years, 14, 15, 16, I had a brush with priesthood.
Wow.
Which is quite bizarre, because what actually happened was our parish priest went on a sabbatical to the States, and while he was away we had a temporary priest who was a Salesian missionary from St John Bosco. Don Bosco was an Italian saint, and the Salesians of Don Bosco provided a part-time support anyway. We had this priest, he was very nice. And of course we had the magazine, the church magazine, and then he was advertising the Salesian camps, the summer camps. And so I said to my mum, oh, this looks really good, summer camp. You go to the Forest of Dean in the beautiful city of Gloucestershire at Blaisdon Hall, because the Salesians had these lovely old halls where they used to have as schools, but they had wonderful facilities. And so as an 11-year-old I went to Blaisdon Hall on a Salesian camp. And it was a mixture of sport and prayer. It was so wonderful for me.
That might have been exciting for you.
Let me give you an example. So you'd start the day, and you'd be camping out in the open, you know, and it was all boys.
In the camp, the tent.
In the tent, yeah. So there was like 8 in a tent, in the middle of the summer. So the weather was always relatively nice. So a typical day is you would wake up. You'd have your tent inspection, you know, to make sure it was clean. Discipline. You go and take your breakfast, and then after breakfast we had the mass. We always had the mass after breakfast, and then after the mass, but the mass we had the guitars and the musical instruments. That was different to the church environment, because there was no music in the church. The Salesians used the guitars and the hymns, and it was wonderful, and everyone was singing, you know, and everyone was happy. And then in the afternoon we'd go on a visit somewhere. We'd go to a monastery, or we'd go to fishing or we'd go canoeing, or doing different things. They had different visits, or we'd stay on site and go swimming. They had a swimming pool. And then we'd have our sports activities in the afternoon. So we had football tournaments, cross-country tournaments, we had cricket tournaments, all sorts of sports. So there was a competitive environment. And then in the evening we'd have our dinner, and then before we went to sleep we'd have a campfire. And we'd all be behind the campfire with cocoa, and we'd have the guitars out again singing hymns and songs, and then you'd sleep.
So that tempted you to get into the priesthood?
Well, and then of course, what I didn't realise at the time, the Salesians were using that, I suppose, as a talent, looking for various talent, to maybe encourage people to go into the Salesian schools, and then to do the novitiate. The novitiate is like a trainee priest. And of course, Father Darwell, who was one of my mentors there, he was from a town called Lee, near Manchester. He was saying, "Oh, Michael, you're good at sport, you're good at this, and have you thought about this, have you thought about that?" And there was one or two other people who influenced me. And at one point, and it's funny enough, because as I got older, I was 14, I was tied up with Bolton. But in Bolton, there was a Salesian college called Thornlea. And they were trying to say, "Why don't you leave your Beamont school, come to Thornlea and study there? It's a good school, you'll." And it was actually in Bolton. So there was a choice of, what do I do? Do I continue with my schooling and my time at Bolton, or do I go to Thornlea and study for the priesthood? And in the end, my mum thought it was wonderful I was considering for the priesthood, because we always had a priest in the house, and my mum was the sort of person, if the priest came to the house, it was like having God in the house. Everything stopped for the priest when the priest came in. My mother would be making cups of tea, cakes, and the priest would be like, we were blessed to have the priest in the house. So the fact I was considering doing this, she was elated, but in reality it was never going to happen. It was never going to happen. It didn't happen, but I learned a lot from those camps.
It brings you discipline. It shapes you up, for life. But the question I needed to ask, you actually said that before a big game, maybe the night before, you pray. But not, let's say, on the day of the game. No. I just want to take a perspective of the team. You were built up within a Catholic environment. So let's say before a game, what sort of faith, process, was there anything like that? Getting the team together for a prayer or anything? To what extent do you think that affects performance?
Okay, so a few things there. So within the team, in those days, there was only 12 members of a football team, because we had 11 players and 1 substitute. So it's slightly different to the game today. And then you'd have the manager and the coach, and and the physio and all that. But on a match day, there'd only be 12 players, and the players came from different families. They weren't all Catholics. Some of them were Protestant. Some of them were other faiths. Some didn't believe in God. Some had no faith at all. So of course, in the team, you had a very mixed bunch of players with their own perspective on faith or not. And of course, it was very much an individual thing. There was not a situation where if you were a Catholic, you'd be a teammate to another Catholic. It wasn't the case, because it was more to do with team camaraderie. I mean, everybody was a Christian, but I think my Catholic upbringing was a lot more than a lot of the other players in the team who maybe didn't come from a Catholic, and they had a different background. So we were looking at it from different angles. We all believed in God. So in terms of the team, it was highly unlikely that you'd see players praying before a game. I remember speaking to you about the African player in Europe who, before a game, went off to a corner of the changing room and prayed, and the European players were looking at him saying, "Oh, what is he doing?" Yeah. Well, there was none of that, but players had their own preparation. Like before you'd go out to play, you'd have your own preparation, like the way you tied your boots, like the way you, just the way you prepared yourself, your thought before you went out. Some players would like to talk a lot, other players would be quiet in the corner. For all I know, they could be praying, but I never saw anyone openly praying.
A good luck charm. Some wear socks in a particular way.
Good luck charm, same boots. All sorts of whatever you call it, idiosyncratic things that people do. And And this all went on. And I'm sure I'd done my praying the night before. Of course, you know, I'm speaking to myself before I go out. Please, Lord, you know, make me have a good game today. Because I was a striker. I said, please don't make me miss a penalty, or please, you know, if I have an open goal, let me score it, because I love to score goals, you know. And in fact, in my early youth, if I didn't score a hat-trick in a game, I was disappointed with myself. I hadn't performed, because I scored lots of goals. For a striker, there's not a better feeling than being in a game you've won 1-0 and you've scored the winner. There's no better feeling for any striker. And you speak to any striker, international club player, and you say to them, how does it feel if you've come away, won 1-0 and you've got the goal? How does it feel? And they'll tell you the same as me. You know, it's 100% and it's a motivator. Okay. And if you've asked the Lord for guidance during that game, it motivates you for the next game to ask for more, doesn't it? You know, and I think, you know, a lot of belief. You see players going through bad phases.
Yes.
10 games without playing well, or
yes.
10 games without a goal, and you know, yet before they'd scored freely or they played well. What is the reason for that? Is it psychological? Is it lack of faith? Is it the fact that I don't know, there's been changes to the team? And some people deal with that in a different way. Some people turn to God and say, God, please help me. You know, I'm not playing well. Why am I not playing well? You know, they want some answers, and you know, players do turn to God privately in Europe, but maybe in Africa they'd openly speak to God about it. And I think that's the difference.
From your perspective, does prayer work?
I think prayer does work, but it's down to the beholder, isn't it? And I think if you have faith, prayer does work. But you have to have faith. Can you pray to be a good player? Will praying make you a better player? I'm not so sure about that, but it will give you confidence. It will give you motivation. It will give you an added factor to take out onto the pitch, knowing that you've spoken to the Almighty and asked for his blessing, rather than maybe not spoken to him at all. And, you know, that's something that individual players decide, you know. And I believe in Africa here, a lot of this goes on, you know, with players here who play in Ghana and the wider Africa. I mean, you know, as we know, football is a big sport. You know, it's a huge... It's like a religion, football, isn't it?
Yes.
You know,
we follow it with everything we have.
Yeah, yeah. And even the teams we see today have their own hymns, don't they? You know, like Liverpool, for example. You know, you'll never walk alone. You know, that's not just a song. You know, if you look at the words, there's meaning in the words.
When
it's
you walk
a hymn.
through the storm.
Yeah, when you walk through the storm. I mean, it's a hymn, and they're all singing together.
Yeah.
And when you hear the cops sing, 30,000 people, and the cops designed so it echoes across the ground, it's unbelievable, you know. And you know, Liverpool was built on a Sunday school perspective, that, you know, going back in 1852, and it was, just as one example, Everton and Liverpool were built, football teams were built on Sunday school teams. That's how they started, you know, local Sunday schools, churches, and these are how they've evolved over the years. So, and actually on Saturday I was watching a little bit about Anfield and what happens behind the scenes, and you know, the tragedy they've had as a club, the Hillsborough disaster.
Yeah. Hillsborough disaster,
you know,
comes to mind.
And if you go to Liverpool now, there's a plaque there with all the unfortunate people who lost their lives in that terrible disaster, and the families seek solace going to the ground and praying by the statue. So, you know, football and religion and faith do go hand in glove. However, individual players interpret it in different ways. Mo Salah, you know, another Liverpool player, you often see him praying before he goes out onto the pitch, you know, and you know, so and the game has become multicultural, multi-religious sport now. When I played, it wasn't like that at all.
Well, we'll be doing a break shortly, but there's a question I wanted to ask again. at some point in your life, I mean, something happens to you and it makes you seek this God,
Yeah.
the faith life that you've been able to build almost, becomes so handy for you. Did you have any instances like that?
Yeah, I did, and I've not really spoken too much about this because I'm quite a private person and I like to keep. But in the height of my football career, and this was one of the reasons why I did retire at age 28. When I was 26, I was a fitness fanatic. I was ultra fit. If you look at me today, I'm nowhere near like I was in those days. And
you've been working.
Yeah. But I was a finely tuned athlete. I'd worked hard at it, and I was fit, and I was never ill. And I thank God for that. But when I was 26, I got struck down with a terrible affliction out of the blue. It caught me by surprise, and when I went to see my doctor, he said, "Oh, this is a very rare condition," and it was a condition called nephrotic syndrome. It affected the kidney.
Wow.
And it knocked me for 6. Ended up in hospital, and I had a number of episodes with this. It would come, it would go, it would come, it would go. But and the treatment I was having, at the time made it difficult for me to keep my sporting sort of fitness up. And so you'd go like 2 months, you'd be ill. I had to go into hospital on various occasions for some acute treatment because I was quite poorly. My parents came every day, and the local priest even came to see how I was doing, which worried me to a certain extent, But I was poorly. And I'd never experienced death.
Mm-hmm.
I was a young man. I never experienced death. I thought everybody was young and active like me, And anyway, I was in this hospital in Liverpool at the time, a specialist hospital. There was 3 of us in a row, and there was me in the middle and a man on the right. And he hadn't been well that previous day. And in the night, I heard all this commotion and noise, and the curtains being back and to. And I woke up next morning and I said, "Where's John?" He said, "He's died."
Wow. Must have been a big shock.
It was a big shock because I'd got to know him, and the man next to me was also very poorly. And I'm thinking, I'm 26. It's the first time I've seen anybody in a close vicinity like that die. Am I going to get out of this? Am I going to... I started to question God and faith and everything, because everything had gone my way, and then all of a sudden I'd hit a brick wall. And my parents were wonderful. They travelled all the way. I mean, it was 30 miles to come and visit me. Every day they would come. My brother's close family would come and support me, and eventually I was strong enough to recover from this condition. But it took a while, and even the doctor's prognosis, when somebody comes down and says to you, "Oh, I have to tell you this, that your condition is not getting any better," you start to worry, don't you?
Yeah.
But somehow, through faith, and I did pray, God had other plans for me, and he wanted me to recover, and that's what I did.
It made you stronger.
It made me stronger, and I'd also had a little bit of... I lost my gran. I was 18, I lost my gran. I was very close to my grandmother. I didn't know my grandfather. But my gran and I were very close. I lost her. She was in a car accident, an accident. She was run over by a motorbike. It was very tragic. And she was in intensive care for 9 months, and I used to visit her. It affected me mentally and caused me some anxiety.
Yeah.
And nervousness, and again I went through this anxiety which was not very good, as a 21-year-old. I had to deal with all this. Again, I came through it, but now I'm strong. I've come through this anxiety and stress, and then I had this illness, and I've got over that, and I feel stronger than ever. I just hope I can keep as fit as I did. But sometimes, this is the point I'm trying to make, it in life, it's not all plain sailing. and sometimes you get things out of the blue that can knock you for six. My gran in the accident. One day she's with me, the next minute she's knocked over with a motorbike, and I couldn't have a proper conversation with her again. She'd gone. And then my own illness. But it's made me not only a stronger person, but it's given me respect for people who are not well, for people who are ill, and it's given me humbleness, I would say, but it's given me more faith.
Mhm.
I don't go to church every Sunday, but I'm a believer.
Mhm. Mhm. I'm just listening. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I also lost my head pastor, and I was that close to him. And so when I hear people talk about these things, I mean, we get an idea. Both parents are alive, all my siblings are alive, but when you get that close to it, and all of a sudden you start questioning, I mean,
is there a God?
Is there a God?
Yeah.
I mean, does he really care about me?
Yeah.
Why do I have to go through this?
Yeah.
Some are able to come out.
You're right.
Like you.
You're right.
Like you and I.
Yeah.
But others.
They can't. And more recently, of course, I lost my dear mum. I was so close to her. 2016, she was a few weeks short of her 80th birthday. My dear mum. I miss her so much, and again, it was a bad time in my life, you know. I still not got over it. I thought the world of her, you know.
And ended.
But again, it's made me stronger. And when I go to visit her grave, I talk to her.
Yeah. Well, so much. I mean, I'm really sorry to bring all that up.
No. It's all part of life, isn't it? And without faith, I mean, if you don't go to church, doesn't mean that you're not a believer, you know. And I think it's funny, because when something happens untoward, like you become ill, you lose somebody who's close to you, or another reason, you always turn to faith and prayer, even if in the past you've forgotten. It always comes back to you, you know. And it's a strange thing, isn't it? When everything's going well, you might not have time to pray.
Yeah.
You're counting your money, or you're picking up your trophy, or your medal, or your new car. Yeah. But should anything go wrong, and everything around you starts to fall apart, and people start to disappear, and your money starts to disappear, you turn to faith. Yeah.
I mean, we want to do a break, but I have a question to ask. Were you always a good speaker right from the beginning, or something you tried?
No, I was.
You were shy?
I was very shy, and I remember, you know, my first speaking engagement, I was so nervous, and I got my words all muddled up, and it wasn't good. But you know, you learn by experience, don't you? And it's like everything else in life. If you don't make a mistake, you never learn. So I've made many mistakes, but with my speaking, I'm quite a shy person. I might seem a bit outgoing, but deep down, I'm a private person.
Very private.
And I'm a shy person, you know.
Okay. Well, Michael has a record I want to talk about. It's actually gone down to the Guinness Book of Records for a number of goals scored in a goal. It's something we want to talk about and reflect a little bit more about his experiences with sports and faith around the world. He's a well-traveled man, been to Asia, the Far East, and other places. A lot more experiences to share after this break. Most welcome back. So my guest again is Michael Porter. Michael, we've been talking about a lot of things, and you're a centre half. One who could
No, centre forward.
A centre forward.
Yeah.
Yes.
Centre forward, stroke winger.
Winger.
Yeah.
Had a lot of speed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of speed, and 100 metres, 200 metres, because I used to, you know, take part at school in athletics. I was more of a short distance runner than a long distance runner.
Okay.
I was very quick off the mark, so 0 to 20 yards, and that's what you need in football. It's not being a 100-metre sprinter in football, it's being very quick off a short distance. So I wasn't clearly like Usain
What do you call
Bolt.
it? Top speed.
Yeah, but from like 30 yards, if the ball was in front of me, I'd get there first, you know. And so I had this turn of pace, and the turn of pace and my build, because I was a bit like I am now, but slimmer, if you know what I mean. I had a stocky build. and I was very difficult to knock off the ball, and I was big for my age as well, but I had this pace, this turn of pace, that gave me an edge over most players, and that led to me scoring lots and lots of goals in my career.
Wow. So the Guinness Book of Records, the one we want to talk about specifically, can you just capture it?
Okay, so at the time, I was around about 17 years of age, and I was playing in a youth league, and this particular season, I finished the season with 76 goals for the season, which I was lucky enough to be voted player of the season for the league. But in one of the games, it was quite bizarre. We were playing this team, and they weren't a bad team, but they weren't a good team. You know, in leagues, you always get good and bad teams. But we must have caught them on an off day, and we beat them 31-0. 31-0. I mean, it was more like a rugby game, but it happened. Yeah. It was an official league game. We had a proper referee.
I've seen one happen in Ghana before.
Have you?
Yeah. 30-31, but it turned out to be a game of convenience, you know.
Right, but this was a league game. It happened in a town not far from Liverpool, in a local league, and I was playing at the time as a centre forward, and at half time I'd scored 8. I thought, oh, you know, this is looking good, you know. And then I missed a couple of penalties, which was quite bizarre in the second half. But I went on to score another 7. Okay. So it was 15 goals. The score was 31-0. And then at the end of the game, I always remember the referee was called Bernie Wright. I always remember this man's name. And he came up to me at the end. He said, do you know, he said, you've scored 15 goals today? I said, no, I didn't know that, Bernie. He said, well, I'm reporting this to the league, because they had to send a report in at the end, you know, with the scorers' names and everything. And then shortly after, a few days later, I got a call from the league secretary saying, oh, Mike, congrats, you've scored 15 goals. I said, oh, right, yeah. He said, we think it's some sort of a record. I said, really? He said, yeah, certainly in this league, we've never known anyone to. So anyway, something happened, and then all of a sudden the Guinness Book of Records got involved, and I got a letter a week or two later from them.
Which year was this?
This would be in 1976. Ooh. Yeah, so it's along 78, 76. I can't remember exactly, but I was, you know, I was a youth, and I got a letter from Beverly Waits, editor of the Guinness Book of Records in London, on official paper, and I've still got it now. In fact, it's on my website if you want to check it.
Have a look at it.
Yeah, and she wrote back to me saying it's the highest we've ever heard of in amateur football, but in professional football, the highest score was 17 goals, so somebody must have scored. So she was confirmed that I'd got the record, and my name appeared in the 76 edition of the Guinness Book of Records.
You're a record holder.
Yeah.
From that time, I mean,
I'm sure it's been broken now.
Yes. But it's still worth talking about it. I mean, right from the 70s, I've never had a record in Guinness Book, and so I mean, I stand in awe of this particular record. Amazing for you to have been able to achieve that. So you talk about something else, which is also important to discuss. Academics. How was it generally?
Yeah. So when I was at school, I got in senior school, I was overrun with sport. I wasn't bothered about anything else. Maths and English, forget it. Science, not interested. Sport, bring it on. Rugby, football, cricket, athletics, anything. I was always there, And I suppose with my comings and goings and everything else, my studies, I wasn't concentrating on my studies. So to a certain extent, when I left school, I didn't do that well academically. So I was disappointed, but I was having a career in football, so it didn't really matter. Or that was the plan. Well, of course, it didn't work out as I wanted it to work out. And football's a short career anyway. So eventually, when my football career ended at Bolton Wanderers, after 3 or 4 years with the club, of course, it's disappointing when somebody calls you in the office and says, Mike, thanks very much, but we're not going to renew your deal. And it hit badly, it was one of these knockout stages, in your life, because my aspirations were to do well. And I had offers from other clubs to go and play for them, And then I took a stock check on myself, and I decided that maybe rather than just join another club and continue along this route, I should take stock of my life. So I decided to take a job with the Electricity Authority in the UK. They were a very good employer, and they put me on a professional training programme, and I decided to play as a part-time professional. So I signed up for one of the top non-league teams. They were paying me fairly well, and I had my job as well, so I was getting a salary from my job. But when I started my job, my boss said to me, "Oh, have you thought about going back to college and doing something? We'll sponsor you. We'll sponsor you through day release." Day release was where you went to college for a day and they would pay my fees. So every Monday I went to college. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday I'd work. And my company sponsored me, and I tell you, it's not easy. You've studied part-time yourself, so you know how difficult it is. So I had my football career, my job, and my studies, and I had my health worries, and all these things going on around my head. But slowly but surely, I passed my diploma. I got my first degree, 4 years.
Wow.
So that's 8 years of study. I got promoted within the company, moved to different locations, and each place I went to, my new boss said, "Have you thought about doing something else now?" So I was lucky enough to do.
Your new bosses were always asking, "Have you thought back?"
Yeah. So
along the way.
So as I moved on from one location, I got promoted to another plant in another part of the country. I continued in my studies. The company continued to sponsor me. And when I went to a new place, I'd just finished my degree, my new boss said, "Have you thought about doing a master's degree?" And so I was getting all this help and support, and I took it. So I would say to anyone, if you're offered something, never turn it down. It was hard work, and it nearly killed me, studying part-time. But I came away with part-time study, with a first degree in business studies, an honours degree, a master's degree in organisational psychology, and another master's, an MBA in business administration. All through part-time. It took me 13 years of part-time study, 1 day a week for 13 years, plus my job. And, that's helped me an awful lot. Because as a failed teenager at school, who hadn't done very well, I knew it was not to the fact that I didn't have it in me. And there are things like late developers. We get it in sport, don't we?
Yeah.
Footballers, you don't find out till you're 25 that you're a real potential. Well, it also happens in the academic world as well. And, of course, when you get your master's degree, it's not really worth much. But once you have a master's degree and 10 years experience, then all of a sudden you're starting to talk. And if you're a serious consultant, management consultant that I am now, I've reinvented myself, then you have to have a minimum master's degree,
Yeah.
I think, before anyone will take any notice of you.
Yeah. It's just a similar story, so I concur with everything you are saying.
Yeah.
But it takes hard work.
Hard work, burning the midnight oil, telling my friends I'm not coming out, I'm staying in, I've got an exam. Oh, come on out. No. Discipline, just like sport, discipline, and actually managing your academic life with your sporting career, and the rigmaroles of training and everything else is very difficult. That's why I opted to go into part-time, being a part-time professional, because I only had to train 2 nights a week, and I could play on a Saturday, and sometimes we had a midweek game. I was being paid, I was enjoying my football, but it wasn't in the big time. But then again, when I look back now at the investment I've made in my education and corporate life, it's paid dividends, because a lot of my colleagues who finished playing football at 33, 34, 35 were really struggling to get into another career, and are probably regretting to a certain extent maybe they didn't. But nowadays, the top teams allow people to do degrees as well as be top players if they wanted to. But in those days it was all different. So I don't regret certainly my illness had an impact on not making me as effective fitness-wise as I could have been, you know. But I don't regret. And actually this year, I've only just decided, but my aspirations are to start a DBA this year. Doctorate.
Do you want to go up
DBA,
higher?
yeah. So a doctorate in business admin. I'm not sure whether it's going to happen, but my colleagues back in Manchester are starting to look for universities that are offering this. So it's something because I don't think you're never too old to learn.
No.
And I don't really need this DBA. It's not going to. I think it's more to do with personal satisfaction rather than anything else.
Yeah.
But this is one of my key targets, and I think you do need key targets.
You know, I have the school's mentorship program, which I've been doing since 2016, interestingly. So it's been 6 years. And this is what exactly we tell the school boys and girls. You are in school, you have an opportunity. Combine your schooling and sports. If you
Absolutely.
Have Make sure you have 2 legs.
Absolutely.
Because your sports career is going to be maybe 10, 15 years, and afterwards you're on your own.
That's it.
So, I mean, if you made a mistake in the early stages and you've been unable to academically get it, as Michael has said here, he was a late developer.
Yeah.
And now he's been able to catch on, and you're trying to do your doctorate.
Yeah,
you know,
I'm thinking
it's
about
more
that.
Personal, satisfaction.
Yeah.
But you need to be able to make it. After sports, what happens? And the time to do that is now.
You need to think long term, not just short term. You know, football or any sporting careers, a short term role. You know, and not everybody can be a top manager when they finish. You know, not everybody can be be involved in the industry when you finish as a player. Whether you're a player or an athlete, or it doesn't matter, it's the same scenario. So, you know, people really need to think this day and age what they're going to do after the age of 30, 35, something like that, the average age when people finish. And you can't just wait for it 35 to come and then say, oh, I'm thinking of doing this now. Clearly you have to plan ahead. And so I reinvented myself. I mean, I was lucky enough to have to be good at sport, but not just one sport, a few sports. Not to be good at studies when I was that age. So the focus was on sport, not studies. But then the tables turned, and I realised that, look, I'd had some great times playing football, Bolton Wanderers, you know, winning trophies and cups and awards. But I realised it was all short term, and I didn't go into another team because I needed to really come back and address my shortfalls in my education, and that's exactly what I did. And now I have my sports background, my qualifications, and since 2004 I've been lucky enough to travel the world, and I've picked up a lot of stuff around the world, cultural, and I've seen different things going on and observed things, and you know, I've got a lot of stuff inside here now.
And that's exactly what I want to find out a lot more. I mean, an international management development consultant and training.
Yeah.
What exactly do you do in that field?
Yeah. So of course I in corporate life I ended up in a HR people management role, you know, and training role, and I sort of left that corporate role mid-30s, and then I became an entrepreneur in 1994. I set up my first company, management consulting, and it was mainly people management issues, training, development, organisational development, delivering programs on leadership, supervision, time management, the soft skills they call it. So I got involved in a lot of that, and then in 2003 I set up this international company, which has led me to work in the emerging markets of Africa, Asia, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe.
Wow.
So I've probably worked in round about 60 different countries since 2004. And as you know, I'm regularly here in Ghana, and I've worked for most of the big companies here in some capacity, probably training most of the banks and the telecommunication companies here, and I've been to some very interesting countries, and I've seen some interesting cultures and some interesting religions as well.
Will you care to share that?
Yeah. So I get invited to speak at various conferences, and about 5 years ago I got an invitation to go to India, to Gujarat. And I'd been to India before, but only to Kolkata and to Mumbai. I'd never been to Gujarat, but it was the World International Youth Conference, and it was being hosted by the Ramakrishna monks in India. They were the host of this, and I was invited as a keynote speaker, so I went. I took the opportunity to go, and it was a wonderful conference. People from all over the world, from various faiths. It was the coming together of all faiths from all over the world. So young people, youths, coming together, some 2,000 people in this big conference hall, and I was there talking, and I got to know, some of the monks, and then the day after they invited me to speak to the head Swami. Swami is the head. So I went to his office. He'd written some books. I was looking at that, and he then said to me, "Oh, would you like to come to the temple?" He said, "We don't normally let people in the temple, but," he said, "you can come in, but you must take off your shoes, be quiet, and just observe. Say nothing." So I went. It was all very quiet, and I went into this temple, and as soon as I got in there, I could feel the aura of calmness, and then the mantra started, the chanting, the smoke, and they were all there in the orange wear, and it was so relaxing. You could smell the innocence, and the chanting, and I'm just observing it, and I'm like, it's like it mesmerizes you, the noise and the faith. You can see the faith they have, and the concentration, and the picture of the Swami, their Lord, who they worship, and it was a wonderful experience. And he said to me at the end, so I went. He said, "What you want to do is take a week off work and come here and be a monk with us for a week. We'd like you to do that." I've still got this open invitation to go. I've never quite found time to go back.
Yeah.
But what wonderful people, caring, wonderful people. They couldn't do enough for you. Wonderful, wonderful people. And that was the Ramakrishna in India. A wonderful experience.
Right. Michael, we have less than 2 minutes to go. What are your plans going forward? Thanks so much for sharing your stories with us. But your plans? My plans,
okay. So my plans are that God will bless me with health and strength. Yeah, that's the first thing. And everybody else, of course. So without health and strength, you're nothing. You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have your health and strength and happiness, it means nothing, I'm afraid. So I'm hoping that my health and strength will continue. Secondly, I want to continue. I've been curtailed like most people have with COVID. I've been grounded, but I've luckily enough been able to come to Ghana. It's my second home, Ghana, as you know. And I'm spending a lot of time in the football studio doing the things that I enjoy, the pundit work. I like to do the training work, although that's been a little bit limited. I've got this DBA on the horizon. I'm not sure whether it will happen, but it's a possibility. And I suppose I'm waiting for my vaccination as well. My COVID vaccination. I got a message the other day to say they've started. So,
in the UK.
I do hope that the pandemic stops, and that all these unfortunate people losing their lives, it will come to an end, and I hope the vaccination will calm the world, and people can start to get back to normal, because it's been a terrible time. I've never known anything quite like it, and most people haven't. So my hopes are that as a world and as a nation, we slowly get back to normal, and we start to live our lives the way we want to live our lives.
Well, many thanks again, Michael, for sharing your story. We want to talk about Vietnam over a period. Michael has these wonderful outfits, and every time he tells you, "I got them from Vietnam." Like what he's wearing now. But all the talk, all the illustrations you give, it just sends me back to India, my own days in India, and it's an amazing world. And
Yeah.
you need to explore the world, see
Yeah.
all the different cultures, be open-minded, and then learn all you can. And it's been a great honor sharing your story with us, and it correlates with a lot of the things people who have sat there in your seat have also said during the course of this program. So again, thank you. And you can find Michael on the internet. He has a website. It's called Michael Potter.
Michael A. Potter, Michael A. Potter Media, or Michael A. Potter International.
Okay.
You can do a Google search, it will come up.
To come up. You find out everything about him. You can get him as a guest speaker, as a motivational speaker, as a trainer for your people in management at the very highest level, and he will just offload himself to you, and then give you all his experiences in touching the lives all over the world. Again, many thanks to Michael. Want to thank you for also making time to watch, and the entire production crew, Auntie Sosu, Daniel, and the cameraman, and so many of you hardworking people behind the scenes making sure we're bringing heart and soul. As I always sign off, I say life is a test, it's a trust, and it's very temporal. We live today, we die tomorrow. So while you have your being, you have your breath, seek your maker, give your life to Christ. Good day, till we meet again. Thank you.
Yeah, hope that was okay.